CityDAO used the new Wyoming DAO LLC legislation to form a DAO. So what the DAO LLC law did was made it so that the smart contract address of a DAO, the Ethereum address of a DAO, was the legal address, making it so that DAOs could incorporate. The original bill was great. It got gutted. A lot of the provisions that made it really exciting were removed, and what we ended up with was a legislation that made it so that there was a key man, basically one person who still is on record and in charge of the LLC, which means that if that one person decides that they don't want to do DAO stuff anymore, they can just pack up and go home. And that is what I was afraid of and what I raised concerns of 3.5 years ago, and 2 weeks ago, depending on when this airs, that is exactly what happened.
Welcome to the ATX DAO podcast, the hub for exploring the forefront of blockchain technology in Austin's Web3 community. We connect you with innovators within ATX DAO and beyond as we venture into the world of decentralized technology. So crack open a beer and join us for a front row seat to learn about the innovations and trends shaping our digital future. This is the ATX DAO podcast.
Welcome to the ATX DAO podcast. We've got two special guests on today who were involved in CityDAO. If y'all would like to introduce yourselves and your background, have at it.
Hey guys, I'm Pat, Pat on Chain on Twitter. I ran the events guild at CityDAO, helped out like a bunch there. Stoked to be here.
Cool, and I'm 0x Joshua. I came into the space in 2017, like trading shitcoins and not participating in ICOs because Americans were not allowed to, and so I didn't, which was a dumb fun fact from 2018. But I came to the space through Lyft, where I was working on driver growth and onboarding, and I got in with this guy Tommy, who was running. I don't know if you guys remember Chaser, which was one of the spiritual successors to, if you remember Arcade City, Swarm City. It was the first attempt at decentralized rideshare. Yeah, so I wrote Chaser's white paper back in 2019, and I met with this guy, Jacob C., who I'm wearing his shirt right now, Hyperplay. He was at Consensus and was like, I'll read your white paper. He read it, and he said, you clearly know a lot about rideshare, but you don't know anything about crypto, so you should take this Consensus Academy class and maybe learn a little bit more about it if you're going to write a white paper for a decentralized rideshare company. And I did. I took the class, and at the same time that I graduated from that class, Lyft decided that our department was not allowed to exist on the books anymore. So we beat Uber to IPO, and then they said, you can find another job at the company or you can fuck off. And so I went back to Jacob and was like, so here, I finished the class, and then we became friendly, and I started talking about that. He's like, no, don't take that job in San Francisco. Come work at Consensus. And so I've been in the space for 5 years now, working in DAOs, primarily in like the Moloch ecosystem. I'm a member of Metacartel. My first few jobs were as a paladin for DAO House and as a hunter for Raid Guild, which we can unpack if that's of any interest.
Sure.
And in the past 4 years, I was a founding steward of Opolis, which I think a few of you maybe are members, or at least you definitely know members. We helped Willie, ATX DAO member, and the entire Fox Foundation basically decentralized when Shapeshift decided it didn't want to be a company anymore. So we do payroll benefits for them. Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha. So very deep in the DAO space for a while, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah.
And what led you to CityDAO?
So at the same time that CityDAO was planning we're going to be the first DAO to buy land, I was actually planning a competitor. So I'm one of the ETH Denver stewards. I'm the Buffacorn steward, as you can tell from all of my Buffacorns. And I helped to found Spork DAO, which most people don't know this, but if you've been to ETH Denver, you're actually a co-owner of ETH Denver. And that's through Spork DAO, which is a Colorado cooperative. And so at the time, this is before SporkDAO had even launched, I founded Colorado, and my goal was to try to put a DAO together to buy one of the old like mining towns in Colorado, like up in the hills. We're like a couple million, and then you just start buying up all these properties and all the land, and you can basically take over an entire town. These are like crazy bull market dreams that did not materialize. But at the same time, CityDAO started getting buzz, and they're like, we're going to be the first DAO to own land. And I was really excited to be part of that, and then very relieved that they were not actually a DAO, and that I could still be the first DAO to buy land. Because what they did was, and this probably gets into the meat of the why we're here, CityDAO used the new Wyoming DAO LLC legislation to form a DAO. And what that legislation does is so for a company to be a legitimate company, it needs a few things, one of which is an address. And you, and I'm sure all of the listeners know, DAOs don't have addresses because they are ethereal somethings, ethereal beings that do not have a physical space. So what the DAO LLC law did was made it so that the smart contract address of a DAO, the Ethereum address of a DAO, was the legal address, making it so that DAOs could incorporate. The original bill was great. It got gutted. A lot of the provisions that made it really exciting were removed, and what we ended up with was a legislation that made it so that there was a key man, basically one person who still is on record and in charge of the LLC, which means that if that one person decides that they don't want to do DAO stuff anymore, they can just pack up and go home. And that is what I was afraid of, and what I raised concerns of 3.5 years ago, and 2 weeks ago, depending on when this airs. That is exactly what happened. And Pat can give some color into how the events that led up to Scott deciding he wanted to take his ball and go home.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. So, it's been like a long, strange trip. Basically, I had gotten done with like a UX boot camp, and I was kind of looking for like gigs and stuff. And one of my friends was like, "Hey, check out this DAO that just formed. They're trying to buy land in Wyoming and put it on chain." And I was into like DeFi and stuff at the time, so I was like, "That sounds really cool. What's a DAO?" And that was my intro to CityDAO, essentially. So I got in, started helping them with design stuff. I helped them form the first council, where we got to write a legal operating agreement and charter for the DAO, which outlined the whole governance structure, how members could participate. It was really cool because we had this opportunity there where we kind of got to decide hey, should we have a core group of people who kind of control it, or should it be led democratically? And we made it through that. I think we had a lot of good people who ended up coming up with some awesome terms to where essentially anybody could buy an NFT, make a proposal, and get funded to do something that they think benefits the DAO. So that's what we had, and it worked for a while. I got to do some awesome stuff through that platform, running the Events Guild, where we did stuff like hacker houses at ETH Denver, sponsored some people to go to hackathons, led some really awesome community events in the Discord and stuff. And it was really cool to see kind of the people that this idea attracted, because it was really smart, brilliant people for the most part. I remember at one point our intro channel, you'd get to see kind of what everyone's background was on their way in, and one day I went in there and it's just all PhDs in this, that. I'm like, oh, whoa. But yeah, I think over time, it was kind of almost the lax structure of it that led to people kind of grappling for power almost. And then that unfolded into just chaos and mudslinging and the Discord, and eventually Oh yeah, go ahead.
Just rewinding a little bit, one of the things that kept me involved in CityDAO year over year was periodically the exact same question about incorporation and employment and how can we employ people and benefits came up. And Pat and I don't remember who else, one or two other people would always reach out to me and go, hey, does somebody from Opolis want to present? And so I'd come back in and I'd give a presentation. And then 2 months later, I would give the exact same presentation again because it was like Groundhog Day, where there was some sort of turnover, people left, somebody else comes in with the same question, and they're like, "Hey, we should reach out to Opolis and see if they want to give a presentation." And that happened like
Yeah.
3 or 4 times, where I gave the same presentation to a smaller subset
What
of
was
the same
the-
people over and over again.
What was the cause of the turnover? Was it like burnout, or was it like the community
It was-
wanted the turnover?
Yeah, it was very much like I feel like these project teams kind of formed around like someone would have like a really ambitious idea. I even kind of saw like Josh fall into this when we were talking about CityDAO 2.0, but people like they see the treasury and they're like, oh, there's $10 million in there, and then they go on Zillow. They're like, oh, I found this property. It's only $8 million. We could buy that. This is what we have to do. And they get really like dead set, and then they'll like recruit some people. But then it's like you have like 4 different teams like that, like vying for like, no, our project is the best. Or so yeah, it was almost, I think people quickly realized like they might get some like initial traction on stuff, but like they couldn't actually like go and spend the treasury or
You'd
like
never be able
$2
to actually
million
pass a proposal
on something. Yeah, yeah. So like
'Cause
people
it was-
just kind of like hit these walls and like fizzled
It was
out.
too factionalized. Like you had
Well,
too many
a
people
little-
that were trying to push forward their project. So if you've got
A
4
little
teams,
bit, yeah.
every time you try to put one through, 3/4 of the DAO votes against you.
I'm imagining
Definitely.
like the chiefs of staff for the military, where it's like, we've got $2 billion, and then the army's like, we need some tanks, and the Air Force is like, no, we need planes, and it's like, and then Navy's like, we need boats, and so then you end up spending it on nothing because they can't agree on what to spend it on. All reasonably good ideas in a sort of vacuum, but the like democracy model for governing a company. I don't know, not in quotes. No, it was a company, not a DAO. So trying to use a democracy to run a company where 1 or 2 guys at the top could just say no at any point. Yeah, it was kind of set up to not succeed from the beginning. You guys tried a bunch of things that were neat.
That
And
is
one of the
like
complaints
yeah.
when we tried to boot up CityDAO 2.0, one of the complaints I kept getting was these guys are just DAO raiders. Any proposal to try to spend any dollar amount from the treasury was labeled as a DAO raider, as in like the people who are going, because I mean, over the past few years, and I don't want to drop examples because 1, I don't want to get examples wrong, and 2, I don't want to name names. But there have been a bunch of DAOs that have been under attack from coordinated efforts to like buy up the token, nuke the treasury, and then raid the funds. Actually, a really good example of that is Aragon. They went through a very public thing that they've actually come out the other side of, which was very nice to see. But CityDAO and the individuals at the top who got so fed up with it are like, we don't want to do this anymore. And that is an entirely reasonable feeling to have. Totally don't blame them at all for wanting to go home. But like, DAOs don't work in a way where you can just take the whole ball and go home. The whole point of a DAO is that you can fuck off and the thing still goes because it's autonomous. It doesn't require your permission to keep the thing going. And so that was the thing. Pat was like, come get involved in CityDAO 2.0. And that was the thing that got me really fired up about wanting to move forward. I don't particularly have any sort of vision for exactly what CityDAO should be, because I don't think I'm not that arrogant to decide what the whole DAO's vision should be. But like, the process was very interesting to me. How do DAOs turn over? When is it time for DAOs to die? these are very interesting points that we're going to come up over the next decade as more companies become DAOs. These sorts of processes are really important. And CityDAO is going to become the perfect case study for why the Wyoming DAO LLC law is bad. It is not something DAOs should use. I think it's a perfect example.
I'm curious, how do you feel about the DUNA approach, the decentralized unincorporated nonprofit association?
Yeah. Do you want to unpack what are the differences there?
Well, it sounds like you've actually got the one point man, which I don't believe Dunas have. Dunas have like a council of sorts. And I believe the decentralized, I mean, here, I can pull it up right now. An A16Z project there being
Pause
put
for
through.
Research. Yeah, let's cut. We'll go back.
Yeah, they've got like a
minute
town council concept that I believe is just supposed to be encoded on chain. But they're nonprofits, so they don't have some of the same requirements that like an LLC is going to have. But they're still not 501c3, so you can't like donate to them and write it off your taxes, unfortunately. But because of that, they don't have as much. They don't have as much overhead in trying to prove that they're a nonprofit all the time, which
Sure.
501c3s really do have to do a lot of that.
I don't. Well, I don't think that DAOs are nonprofits. I think DAOs should definitely be for profit, like trying to disguise and I don't want to say misuse, like the legal categories to try to fit into some legal category. I've spent a decent amount of time with. There's a group out of Paris that's like working on this, like the DAO form law, and they're trying to come up with ways for DAOs to have some sort of legal stature and be incorporated everywhere in the world. And it's an admirable effort. And one of the questions I keep coming across is, will a DAO actually see themselves as one of the things that is inside of this law that's been created? So on the one side, you've got organizations are going to try to fit into whatever legal hole they can because that's the right way to raise money. Like if you're going to raise money in the US from accredited investors, you have to jump through all of the hoops, one of which is you have to have a legal entity. So what is the right legal entity? And like, it's kind of disheartening that all of the lawyers say like, do a small raise out of a Wyoming or Delaware C Corp and then go offshore. It's like, that's why, like what, that shouldn't be, the legal guidance should not be leave America. Like we need to come up with inside of the states ways that make sense so that we're not driving innovation and tax revenue. Yeah. Call me a Fed, the tax revenue offshore, right? Like, so this is one of the reasons that I like and push the Colorado LCAs, because a limited cooperative association, there is like jurisprudence for cooperatives. The shares of cooperatives are not considered to be securities. There's case law to support this. It is older case law, but cooperatives are one of the oldest, I think, American inventions. The first cooperative was founded by Ben Franklin in Philadelphia. It was like some insurance thing related to firefighters. It's like there's no more American DAO than a cooperative because the entire concept was founded by Ben Franklin. He just didn't have blockchain, and if he did, this is the legal model he'd be using for sure.
Yeah, maybe there's some extensions to that we could be looking at in terms of just not filing as much paperwork, right?
Sure. Yeah. The co-op still does have some paperwork. We've got a great law firm out of Colorado that I work with for all of the Colorado LCAs. We've helped set up Launch Legal. You have Much, she's great. It's not too expensive, not a ton of paperwork. But one of the things that I really like about cooperatives is the legal liability is not on the members of the DAO. It's not on the members of the cooperative. Cooperatives are organized in a way that the board shoulders the legal responsibility. And so what you can do is you set up a republic and not a direct democracy, which democracies are a disaster. And the U.S. is set up as a republic. Most DAOs that function are set up as republics. When you look at like Arbitrum Security Council, when you look at Optimism's bicameral legislation, where they've got the Citizens House, they've got the Token House. All of the DAOs that are like functioning at a high level use a representative or republic, not a direct democracy. And the cooperatives, you have direct democracy for electing a board, and then the board is responsible for making these decisions. And if that sounds like a Discord electing a multi-sig, that's because they line up pretty perfectly. And that's the legal entity that allows you to have a token that represents patronage, or a governance token for the cooperative that has economic privileges, because you're allowed to pay a dividend to the shareholders, very similar to, I'm sure you're familiar with REI, the outdoors company. It's a co-op. You buy your skis, your hiking equipment, whatever. At the end of the year, you get like 10, 15, $20 back. That's your dividend, because you're an owner of REI. And that sort of stakeholder capitalism is how all companies should function. And it breeds like an internal sense of loyalty. But it also is like, it's actually a DAO. Like REI is a DAO.
I mean, that's a pretty great like breakdown of why that kind of model could work well. Definitely, we've seen a lot of DAOs migrate away from direct democracy. Yeah.
I've got a question
Pat,
specifically.
go ahead, Ken.
Sorry, go ahead. My question was about like coordination. Like a lot of consensus building, at least in ATX DAO, is done in person. And so there's a lot of like FaceTime involved in like you might call it like the subtleties of human behavior, where it's like, you're talking to someone in person and you're kind of like hashing things out together. And so I was curious, as far as coordination and consensus building, like within CityDAO, do you think it was made more difficult that you guys could not all get together in a room and start talking about things, that you were distributed across the globe, and that made it a lot easier, or potentially it could make it easier for rifts to bubble up and like problems to fester, rather than meeting in person and hashing things out?
Yeah, for sure. I think like IRL meeting is like a vital function of any organization. There's subtleties to human communication that can't be communicated through the digital like signals that we're communicating by right now. And I mean, minus that, like I think like people just work together, come up with more creative ideas and respect each other like a lot more when they build bonds like in person. So I think like going forward, it's probably gonna become more like natural for almost any type of DAO to have like community spaces that pop up. And I think we'll see that almost become like a SaaS, to where, like DAOs can, go on some service, rent out spaces for their members, or participate in like another DAO that like offers that as a service. Kind of like a network city. Yeah.
That's to plug a friend, Metacamp. I don't know if ATX DAO is doing something similar, but Metacamp down in Costa Rica is a great experience for that. So they've got Metacamp where like people from all the different DAOs kind of come together for a retreat, but then that space is used the rest of the year for like offsites for DAOs to come, and like for the members of one DAO to come together, do some team building.
I think, Cabin Neighborhood Zero has definitely pushed some similar events locally.
Yeah. I haven't been to one of their events, but I participated in one of their treasury diversification rounds. Very carefully did not say I was an investor. But I was driving through Austin and was like, "Hey John, can I come see the place?" And it was at that time that I realized, you guys know Zach, with the double K, that he and I went to college together and we didn't even know it. And like I show up at Cabin the Zero out near Johnson City, and we just like discovered that by accident. It's a very small world.
Hey, you know those in-person meetings, right?
Yeah, you don't find that out when you're
Yeah, I
on a
mean,
podcast.
I met my co-founder that like I'm currently working with at like a cabin retreat. So like I
Oh
know
wow.
we were at this 2 month co-living for like tech people or like Web3 people, I guess. But yeah, like everybody like we met there, like we're all still like friends, we all talk like still. And I know like after we did that, like at least half of the people were like, how do I just do this full time? Like if there was, I think at that time, just a network of these other houses to go to, a lot of us would have just moved into that like full time right there.
The, so, before you ask your next question, that was one of the when Pat was like, "Yeah, Josh fell into this too." There is a $16 million, like 60 or 600 acre, like coffee estate in the middle of nowhere, Puerto Rico, that has been on the market for over a year. And I'm like, we need to buy this. Like a DAO should buy this. It could support literally everybody who works in the ecosystem. All of us, all 10,000 of us who work in the entire ecosystem could go live on this property. Kind of a joke
Yeah,
about how bot farming, but yeah,
well, CityDAO did buy some land, right? There was a 10,000 acre parcel that was undeveloped. Were there efforts
Yeah.
to develop that?
it's smaller than that,
I think
right?
we bought like the minimum threshold of what you can call land, I feel like. So
It
like
definitely
we
was not
actually
10,000 acres.
Okay, I
yeah,
thought it was
no,
fairly large.
it was
But
40 acres, but
40 acres. Okay.
yeah, it was out in like rural Cody, Wyoming. Beautiful place, by the way. Highly recommend you visit if you're listening to this. But yeah, like so like we went out there one time and like the land is like a hill first off, and then it's all like rocky. The well on it, I guess it was put up there as like a protest. Like the guy put like wells a certain distance apart so people can't like drill oil or something. So it only produces, I think, like a few liters of water per day. So like no real like water source.
Wow.
But yeah, we went up there. We planted like a flag in the ground, and it's pretty cool.
How was Parcel Zero chosen?
I actually wasn't there at that time. I joined right about after they picked it, but I think it was literally like a Discord poll. And I think like at the time they had like 10,000 people in the Discord just voting and like
Most of who
weighing
were
in
not
on this type of
members.
stuff. A lot of like non-member people at that point. Yeah.
So yeah, my
That's
one
great.
of one of my complaints at the time was that like, so there's like, you said 10 million. I thought it was closer to like 3 or 4 million in the treasury. And
It was
the
at
land,
1.15 mil, yeah. Like at the peak.
so
Yeah.
15 mil in the treasury, and the first land that is bought by a DAO is this like $100,000 piece of crap in the middle of nowhere that nobody can get to, that has no infrastructure to support anybody going and staying there. So it's like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, what? It's
Yeah. I
like a
think very
kindergarten art
much
project.
Parcel Zero was always supposed to be like a proof of concept, like, hey, let's do this thing that's like very like headline worthy, get some like attention, and then build like off of that. But the problem we ran into is I don't think DAOs are made to govern a non-existing product. Like you can't use a DAO to work as a team and bring a product into existence. Like you can't like 0 to 1 with like a DAO.
I
DAOs are
disagree.
very much I like it's fun to try for sure, and I won't like deny that. But I think that they're much better suited for if you have an existing product and you want to give your users some like stakehold in like governing that product essentially.
I would definitely say that that's better.
Mm-hmm.
But I also say in the tokenize everything camp, and
Mm-hmm.
that all corporations should go away and everything should be governed as DAOs. So
I love that like vision, yeah, for sure.
I think that would be a better world in a lot of ways. Definitely in terms of like reducing inequity, which we see a lot of these days.
yeah.
So you
Could
guys
imagine
were
if
also
every grocery
talking
store
about. Oh,
was.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, could you imagine if every grocery store was organized as like a food co-op? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you'd patronize the store more often. You incentivize local farming, all that
I'd
good
sign
stuff.
up for that version of capitalism.
right?
For sure.
Stakeholder capitalism. This is what it's called.
You guys have like kicked around an idea of like a V2, and so I would be really interested to learn like you guys, what have you learned from V1, and how would that translate into like what V2 would look like and that sort of thing.
So I mentioned Metacamp earlier, and then I'll let Pat explain the proposal. Um, uh, Actually, maybe you should go first. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say like something along the lines of like what Josh was saying earlier of like who am I to govern this? But I think really like at the best times what CityDAO did have was a platform for people who were interested in this idea to come and propose like, hey, this is how I think I can push it forward and get like a little bit of like starting capital to like work on that essentially. So I think like creating platforms like that allow people to come together around ideas and then facilitate like seeding them and like growing whatever like ventures come out of it. I think that's something I'd like to personally explore with it.
And so Pat recruited me to this CityDAO 2.0 effort, and in the course of this, we were drafting a proposal to CIP 214 to combat Scott's 212. And I was approached through a friend of Yaler, who runs Metacamp, she introduced me to Park, which is the leading developer in Bali. And they had a really neat concept, and I was sold from the pun. They've got a lot of great attributes, but the pun, this guy, Jamie, he wants to build Silicon Bali. Who doesn't want to be part of that? It's like the best pun ever. Like, I just take my money, man. So Silicon Bali is the concept that they want to build in Bali of they call them smart cities, but it really kind of sounds more like mixed use housing neighborhood where it's basically like live and work in the same 30 acres. Everything is a 5-minute walk away. You've got your, one of every store or whatever, and you've got some housing to support, I don't know, 200 to 500 people. And it's like the beginnings of a city somewhere. And he wanted to fill it with some single family homes, but also these like very specifically hacker houses that were like 6 to 8 bedrooms, that were like small bedrooms, but bigger communal space set up to have like an office, and having co-working spaces not far away. And so he wanted CityDAO to be one of the cornerstones of this new Silicon Valley city. And I thought that was a really cool vision. And so that was kind of what we had started focusing the CityDAO 2.0 vision on. And we kind of got railroaded by
It's honestly
CIP
like
212. Sorry, what?
It's like honestly just FUD.
Yeah, it was some FUD. And then like there was what I would say is a misinterpretation of the operating agreement where a certain number of votes have to be cast in favor of spending a certain percentage of the treasury. I don't believe that those thresholds were met. They made the argument unilaterally that they were met, and we're saying, oh, there's overwhelming support for closing the DAO. And CIP 212 actually didn't say to close the DAO. It said to close the LLC, which is not the DAO, and to refund the money. And it didn't address what to do with the land or any of the intellectual property. And with the refund of the NFTs, which that's not a thing. People don't get refunds for NFTs, but they decided they wanted to refund NFT purchases, that they would not offer a possibility of keeping it in the DAO. They're like, nope, we're closing up shop. And so it was worded in a very specific way. I'm fairly like, I don't have the time or money to like make this a legal battle, but I'm almost certain that Scott would lose if one of the members of the DAO decided to sue him over this. Because like the way that it was done was just like, was horrible.
Yeah, definitely.
Just looking for an escape button.
Very like haphazardly done. Yeah,
he had an eject button. It was like just like turn over the LLC and go home.
Yeah,
like you could have just given it to somebody else.
That was probably like best course of action. I think he was so concerned with like his reputation. Like, say he gives it to someone and then they go create like a pump and dump token, and now like he's kind of on the chain for that. Yeah.
No,
So
he
it's
isn't.
like,
Because that's how DAOs work.
yeah,
They're
yeah, I guess
decentralized. That's
Yeah.
the whole point, is that it's not one person's problem.
for sure.
We've
Yes.
seen some interesting, like, I don't know. Being part of a DAO is like a very nebulous thing. Like, you can technically hold a token of the DAO, and not participate in anything that the DAO is doing, and just kind of like lurk that I'm part of this DAO. And then maybe without ever talking to anyone or doing anything, you could then go off and say, yes, XYZ DAO is now launching this initiative. So I think like DAO brand is like important, and like there should be some kind of safeguards on that, to try and prevent people from just unilaterally leveraging the brand.
Sure.
So it's like, to what
Yeah, we
degree
ended up
should
just-
autonomy be supported, I guess?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question.
We ended up like trademarking the brand, and then also like giving certain people access to like the Twitter accounts. And it's like, I think we wrote like rules into the charter on like how access to this stuff is supposed to be like divvied out. But then like there was nobody was like set like responsible for like, oh, you're supposed to transfer like the passwords. So it's like it just never got done, and then it became this thing where it's like one guy just like has access to it, and he's like,
Yeah.
I'm not giving it to anyone. What are you doing for me? It's like,
Little plug for Hats Protocol. Hats Protocol fixes that.
yeah.
Working on that right now for ATX DAO. We got our
Are you?
rules and reputation
Excellent.
system.
This is like going back to, though, it's like you have to have like something there to like govern before you put the DAO on, or else it's like you never get to hats and everyone's having a bad time.
Yeah, I
do
think
think
there's a
there's-
progressive decentralization.
Yep. That's it. That's
Yeah.
progressive decentralization's like, that is the way. Like, build a thing, hand it off. There's Joe DeLong he's got a good tweet from like 2021 that was like that. It was like, show me one DAO that decentralized early that has shipped any product ever.
Yeah,
And I
maybe
think
the
that's probably
closest
still
one
stands.
to like an effective DAO that just went decentralization out of the bat was Constitution DAO, right? They had a very clear goal.
Well, okay, so
They didn't
as
succeed, but
as a purist, I would also say the Constitution DAO wasn't a DAO because, one, your people tokens didn't have any sort of claim of ownership over anything. Not at all. It was token gated access to a Discord. The members of the DAO didn't choose the multi-signers and had zero recourse to replace the multi-signers. The only part of Constitution DAO that was a DAO is the word DAO and the word Constitution DAO.
there's definitely like a point that DAOs are starting to hit right now. Like over the past couple of years, DAOs are kind of like it's a high trust system, or has been, right? Because there isn't that nice legal entity that actually enforces some kind of law. So if it's not on chain, it's just trust, right? And it's hard to put everything on chain.
Or what can be done on chain is the law. And so if there is no other sort of like social or legal recourse, what can be done on chain is what is. And so if there's no recourse that you have on chain, you just fucked, right? And so then
Yeah, we were using
The
like the
original DAO.
Ricardian contracts for a while, and I feel like that's like a pretty good solution to this issue of like not having legal accountability with like on-chain actions. But it's like, yeah, if you can just embed like an actual contract that like you're agreeing to in there, that seems to make sense.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Moloch DAO stuff is based around that, right? How much can you actually put on chain and make enforceable, but like not need an external entity to do that. And I think that's maybe the heart of what DAOs are supposed to be, right? Is that there isn't an external entity. Like you said, code is law.
Yeah, I don't actually believe code is law in the sense that like most of like the ETC like early code is law people from the DAO era believe it, because laws can be changed, and so can code. So it's like if you can change I never liked the originalist argument, but the thing you brought up about Molochs, like the key thing that makes Molochs DAOs, that's like at the heart of it, I would say is rage quit and rage kick as functions, because it allows you to bring in and offboard members without blowing up the entire DAO or without having to do some sort of fork. And this was something I'd advocated for in early CityDAO, and would have been a perfect use case for Scott and David and the other guys that wanted to leave to rage quit. You take your pro rata shares and you fuck off. But the DAO stands after you have gone home.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're seeing, Nouns DAOs survive a fairly significant kind of rage quit situation, and they're trucking along.
Kind of. Yeah. Oh, and so yes, it is functioning, and I love Nouns. And you could chalk up the overall market, but like going from a 60 ETH base bids to now they go for like 6 ETH now, right? But like the resilience of even taking that 90% cut and still humming along is actually really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, not to say it wasn't a shock to the system, right? But
it kept going.
I think there's a lot of organizations which, seeing that level of split, would have just collapsed.
Yeah, I like that they allowed the rage quit and that people could like cash in and go home, but it didn't have to brick the entire project. That's the why we're here. These are the experiments that we're trying to prove out.
If you were to start a smart city yourself, what would the progressive decentralization look like? Like, how would you start out, and then what would your like first priorities be to like progressively decentralize?
So I'd probably start off as a monarch and end as a mayor. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, definitely. I think like what we were exploring with Park is like feels to me like a good start, because having like say a cul-de-sac of these like 8-unit like hacker houses, that allows us to let 4 or 5 different like groups test out like ideas for each one. And then like from there we can expand stuff that's working like onto like nearby lot, like work like that. But like I think generally like something like that where there's like this clear structure for people to kind of take like a templated like building idea and then like run with like what goes inside of it, like essentially.
I think you start with
little petri dishes.
Yeah.
I think that's a good implementation layer of what could be, where you start with a builder. And this is how all neighborhoods in the US are built now. You've got a builder who buys a bunch of land, builds a bunch of things, and then sells it off to individuals. I think it's not a perfect model, but I think that model kind of does work, where you've got a sort of a centralized builder, or, you could even be a DAO that doesn't have, is like pre-token generation event, and you've got a core team that is responsible for like building it out, and then it sells off individual components to sub DAOs, where you've got like, I don't know, let's say you've got a bar, and instead of one guy owning a bar or one billionaire owning a sports stadium that taxpayers pay for, you've got everybody who wants to in the world. It wouldn't you have to be residents who wants to kick $10 into a juice box, or to like a DAO house eater who now owns part of this bar and is able to see partial dividends, and is able to, who wants to come and visit the thing once a year or once every other year because they own $10 of this bar and they want to see it succeed. And once you get these incentives aligned around a physical place that is networked to Cabin and the other network cities, Epoch Island, the Zuzalu stuff, like there's a lot of different experiments that can all be tethered together with just Ethereum as the settlement layer. Because that's like, we just met today for the first time, but we're colleagues. You and I, we've been colleagues for 3-4 years now.
Sure. We're in the same space. We're working on the same stuff.
Yeah.
And just invisible colleagues up until now.
our paychecks are signed by different people, but like we're all working in the same company.
Or less. We're working towards the same vision, that's for sure, or one that's similar.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the really enticing things that Park offered was they've got a large fund that they are looking to bring on entrepreneurs to build these sort of smart cities, and they were interested in CityDAO putting up one of them. But it was a very lucrative situation that could have been very good for CityDAO. But like, because the key man doesn't like responding to Discord messages, the entire experiment is over. We didn't get to try it.
It's kind of been like the whole experience, honestly. But yeah.
So we had a couple of years between the start of CityDAO and then right now kind of the unwinding. Were there like major initiatives or like projects that were started during that time period that didn't come to fruition but you wish had?
Ooh, good question.
Definitely, yeah, like one of them, Town. Definitely look into that. Like on the CityDAO forum, you can still find it. But like, yeah, like we wanted to actually, like we got some traction of like people agreeing on like, let's build network cities, like co-working, co-living spaces and start there. But yeah, it just never kind of like fizzled out, I feel like.
One of the to represent Scott's side here, one of the reasons he wrote CIP 212 was, as he stated, he had put 7 proposals forward on different initiatives to move forward with CityDAO, and all of them failed to meet the required quorum, and so that was what led him to decide he didn't want to do this anymore.
Were there which proposals met quorum? Like what got through? What major pieces did the entire
Dissolving the
community
LLC,
approve of?
apparently.
Okay, that one, yeah.
That one, yeah. So,
Which I forgot to finish the math.
Well, actually,
for
I thought
and-
you were saying that one maybe didn't hit all the requirements.
No, I don't think it did, because they were saying an overwhelming majority wanted to close the LLC, when it was actually only 9% of the 10,000. There's 10,000 NFTs, and so it got like 1,000 something votes total and 900 something in favor. Very close. So it was like 9 to 11%.
yeah, I just
Turnout.
feel bad. Like, I feel like there's probably people who bought those at like $4,000, just kind of like forgot they had it because like the Discord's been kind of dead, and then they just got $300 like for it now.
Yeah, point 0.12 ETH or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, tough to keep track of all those different communities and projects. Good not to dabble in too many of them, lest you
Yeah.
end up with something that just.
And we were fine with the dissolution. And I had pitched him on, and I had developers ready to build a smart contract that would do basically a Merkle distribution where people who wanted to get a refund could burn their NFT, take their refund, and the people who wanted to participate in V2 could either burn their NFT to get a new one, or would send their old NFT to the new one's multisig so that the new one would receive the refund, or be able to claim the refunds. And he was like, no, we're just going to disperse all of the funds to addresses regardless of whether they are active or not. And so I'd probably at least 2,000 to 3,000 of those are just like dead addresses. Thank you for reducing the Ethereum supply, Scott. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I know, like, at least one of my friends had, like, 9 NFTs in, like, a wallet that he lost a while ago, so, yeah, that was kind of a waste.
That's almost money.
Nah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. It sounds like there's a lot of pain and frustration going on there, over 2 years of spinning wheels.
I'm very fortunate I didn't have to spin my wheels that long. I spun mine for like a month and a half alongside Pat in this V2 effort that technically is not over. If we decided like Park is still on board, and theoretically we can still try to use the CityDAO IP. But like,
where can we go and check that out? Like all the stuff that you're working on for upcoming stuff.
We don't have
Park.
anything going quite yet for the CityDAO 2.0. We still have to wait for like old leadership to kind of transfer stuff over, make sure we have like the rights to actually use like the IP and all that. But yeah, like I'm personally doing something that is kind of like an expansion on what we were thinking about with these network city nodes. So like I'm building a hacker house. It's called Accelerate with an 8. So you can go to joinaccelerate.com. Maybe we can like link it below or something. But yeah, so like, you know, our idea is we found like a house in Nob Hill, San Francisco. It has 15 bedrooms, and we're thinking get all Web3 and AI founders just living together for 3 months. Kind of like see what comes out of that, like connecting them with like fundraising opportunities, just the sense of community, being around other people doing the same thing as you. And see if we can turn stuff like this, like the demand for kind of like tech housing and stuff like that, co-living, into actual nodes like around the country in some sort of like DAO structure.
Well, if there's any way that ATX DAO or one of our sister local city DAOs can help out, you know, give us a shout.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, right now, if anyone's listening to this and you do any sort of event stuff in San Francisco, connect with me. We'd love to host something this summer.
I think there's an Oakland DAO floating around.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, definitely.
Joshua, is there any project that you would want to link people to?
What I'm working on right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're building ASOS Finance, which is a over collateralized stablecoin that is backed by real world impact assets. So think like everything from like Gitcoin, like GTC, to carbon credits, green bonds. So we're trying to angle it and bill it as the central bank for the regenerative impact economy. It's based off of MakerDAO, but instead of ETH as collateral, it's partner projects that use like carbon credits and green bonds.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Like you said, impact work.
Yes, except for it's also profitable DeFi. So we try not to use like the words green and like ESG because it scares people off. They're like, oh, that's not going to make money. But it's a combo of Maker and like Frax code. And so the stablecoin actually generates a decent amount of money for the protocol. And it's not the thing that gives away money. It supports the projects that do the funding work of the planting of the trees and the carbon capture and all the good stuff.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. Well, I think we're going to pull the podcast to a close here. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for chatting with us and giving us the rundown on just what happened with CityDAO and you know, where things are headed.
Yeah,
Thanks
of course. I was going to write a post-mort, but like this was so much more fun.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the ATX DAO podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. To learn more about ATX DAO, visit us at atxdao.com and follow us on X, Farcaster, and LinkedIn at ATX DAO. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.